So with that, that's a natural progression to our next speaker, talking about diversity. And as you heard from Mary Beth, she wants to talk about not just diversity in the workplace, but also how do we develop the workforce. So with that, we have our next presenter is Will Markow, and his presentation is going to be about a diverse workforce, a linchpin to success. And what that's about is we all been hearing, we got to do something, but what does the data say? We all like to make smart decisions about what does the data say. So Lightcast, which you're going to be hearing from Will as the Vice President of Applied Research at Lightcast. Lightcast is the labor market analytics provider that powers cyberseek.org. I know most people have heard of cyberseek.org. You always hear about how many vacancies are out there. It's a career security, career exploration portal, but there's something behind that, and that's what Will's going to be sharing with us. And I think it's kind of neat that the company's name is Lightcast, because we heard from Renee about the North Star. So all the space things comes together. So with that, Will, come on up.
Great. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Right. Well, thank you all so much. It truly is a pleasure to be here today, and really am honored that I was invited to speak at this event and be part of this discussion, especially after such a thoughtful opening panel. Now, as some of you may know, the company I work for, Lightcast, is a labor market analytics provider, and we really strive to be the global authority on talent intelligence. And so because of that, we're very much data forward, and we usually like to start these conversations by diving into the data. But today I want to switch it up just a little bit and start with a personal anecdote that I think helps to provide context and framing for today's conversation. Recently, I was rummaging through some old boxes in my basement, trying to clear out some clutter, and I came across a box of my grandparents' old things. And in that box, I found a resume from my grandfather from back in the 50s. And I thought, how great is this? I analyzed the job market. I get to get a glimpse into what the job market looked like and what my grandfather thought employers valued back in the 50s. And the first thing I noticed was that on the first page of the resume, there was nothing about his career history. There was barely any mention of skills that he held or anything that today we would think is actually relevant for proficiency in a job. There was, however, information about his marital status, how many kids he had. There was information about his complexion, his height, his eye color, because obviously you can't be an engineer if you don't have blue eyes, right? Everybody knows that. There was even information about his political beliefs, and he had to explicitly state he was anti-communist. This was, after all, the era of McCarthyism. And so I looked at this and I thought, wow, how antiquated does that seem? Nothing here actually seems relevant for whether or not my grandfather could do his job. I started to think about it a little bit more, and I realized that while we don't have such egregious examples as having to state our political beliefs on our resume anymore, we still do have hiring practices that artificially constrain the pools of talent that we're tapping into, especially in cybersecurity. Many of the job postings that we look at Lightcast for jobs in cyber, no, they're not asking about your marital status or your complexion or anything like that, but they're still asking for many qualifications that are artificially constraining the pool of talent that we're pulling from. Maybe it's asking for a bachelor's degree in a job where it's really not needed. Maybe it's asking for many years of work experience for a role that could be performed by somebody who's fresh out of college. Maybe it's asking for dozens of skill sets or certifications that, again, are not the best barometers for success in a particular role. However you slice it, no, it's not as egregious as what my grandfather had to deal with back in the 50s, but we are still artificially constraining opportunities in cyber, and it is clear that the cybersecurity talent pipeline is still broken for very large pools of our population. And this makes it more difficult for us to bring in fresh blood into the industry and keep that fresh blood in the industry. The good news is there are some steps that we can take to help build the next generation of cybersecurity workers if we find ways to tap into more diverse pools of talent. Of course, if we're going to build a more diverse workforce, we have to know something about the workforce that we're in today. And so that's where Lightcast comes in. We really strive to illuminate the job market, both in cybersecurity and beyond, by providing detailed, actionable insights about some of the trends that we're seeing within the workforce, as it relates to diversity, talent pipelines, or anything else. We've been analyzing the cybersecurity job market in particular now for over a decade. We've released a number of reports, produced data on the workforce, but this work has really culminated in the development of cyberseek.org. As some of you may be aware, CyberSeek is a cybersecurity career exploration portal. It's completely free, open to anybody to use, and allows you to dive into your location, understand supply and demand for cybersecurity jobs where you are. It also has an interactive career exploration portal, as well as information about training providers that you can go to in order to learn more about the skills you need to enter into cyber. And CyberSeek is a joint collaboration between Lightcast, CompTIA, as well as NICE, and it was really intended to arm people with the information that they need to make better decisions about either entering into a career in cyber, or if you're an employer or a policymaker, helping to grow the next generation of cybersecurity workers. And so much of what I'll share with you today pulls from either the work we've done in CyberSeek or some of the other research that we've produced on the cybersecurity workforce. And so to dive in, what are the data telling us about the cybersecurity workforce, and why are they suggesting that it's so important for us to expand the talent pools that we're recruiting from? Well, the first thing that we see is that despite much of the economic uncertainty over the past year, cybersecurity job demand remains very robust. The past 12 months, there are over 660,000 job openings in the US for cybersecurity workers, and there are already over 1.1 million existing cyber professionals in the country. We've also seen very rapid growth within this industry, and in many cases we're seeing that cybersecurity jobs are growing 2, 3, 4, even 5 times faster than IT jobs overall. They also were far less likely to see a dip in demand during the pandemic. So these are critical roles that we need more of. But with this strong demand and with this growth has also come some growing pains. A lot of people will debate whether or not there really is a talent gap in cyber. When you look at the data, it's very clear that there is. We currently only have about 69 skilled cybersecurity workers for every 100 that employers demand, which means we're effectively stepping onto our cyber battlefield, missing nearly a third of our army. And this not only has serious implications for our national and personal security, it also has real implications for the bottom line of companies. Not only are they now more likely to be hit by a cyber attack, but they're also seeing that these jobs are taking longer to fill, and they have to pay, on average, at least $10,000 more for most cybersecurity jobs than other IT roles. And so this talent gap has real ramifications for both our national and personal security, as well as the bottom line of companies. It's also not just isolated to one pocket of the country. It's not just isolated to tech hubs. Virtually every state across the country shows evidence of a talent gap in cyber. And in some regions, it's even more acute, such as here in the DMV region, where we have even fewer skilled professional workers for every 100 that employers demand compared to the national average. And so because this talent gap is so widespread, it's very clear that we need to pull people from all walks of life. We need to pull people from as many talent pools as possible if we're going to close this gap anytime soon in all of the communities where it exists. Of course, if we're going to close that gap, we also need to know how we're doing in moving the needle in diversity in cyber. So if we know we want to tap into more diverse talent pools, we have to know our baseline. Are we already effective, or is there more work to be done? The first thing we see when we look at the data is that there is some good news. When we look at racial diversity within cyber, it's actually been trending upward consistently over the past 10 years. In fact, we've seen yes. Let's celebrate that, right? That is something we're celebrating. It's not quite at the same level as what we see in IT overall, but it is trending in the right direction, and that is worth celebrating. However, just because something is worth celebrating doesn't mean it's also worth stagnating. There's still more work to be done. And so unfortunately, there's also some bad news. And that is when we look at gender diversity in cyber, we're actually going in the wrong direction. It's actually decreased nearly 30% over the same time frame. And so it's clear that while we have done a good job of expanding opportunities for many populations, there's still work to be done in helping to attract and retain a group of people that represent roughly 50% of our population. Now, this is not a unique challenge to the United States. This is a global phenomenon, and gender equality has been elusive in cyber in most of the world. In fact, the United States is roughly in the middle of the pack when it comes to gender diversity in cyber. We have somewhere around 20 to 25% of our cyber workforce is currently female, which is better than some countries we're seeing, such as Germany or Great Britain, which are 20% or lower. But it's not quite the same level of countries such as Finland or the Philippines, which are both actually considered two of the best countries in the world when it comes to gender equality. And so it's clear that there's still more work to be done and that the cyber talent pipeline is still broken for large swaths of our population. If we're going to fix that talent pipeline, we have to figure out what are some of the barriers, what are some of the root causes of the broken cyber talent pipeline that we need to try and fix. The first thing that we see is that skills in cybersecurity are constantly evolving. Cybersecurity, more than almost any other field that we look at, sees a very dynamic set of requirements and set of skills due to either new cybersecurity techniques or new threat vectors we need to protect against. Maybe it's new regulatory requirements or frameworks that we need our people to know. Maybe it's just new technology and the pace of technological change. Whatever it is, though, we've seen that in just the past 2 years, nearly a quarter of the top skills required for cybersecurity professionals have shifted. And when you have such rapid skill evolution in a field, it's very difficult to train people for that field and keep their skills current. And so you're essentially going after a moving target when you're trying to prepare workers for this field, which means that we need companies and individuals to really invest in continuous learning in order to keep their skill sets current. We also see that a major challenge to growing the cybersecurity workforce is just finding more entry-level opportunities. We look at the degree requirements and the experience requirements in cybersecurity jobs. We see that over 80% of cyber jobs say you must have a minimum of 3 to 5 years of prior work experience. A similar percentage say you must have a minimum of a bachelor's degree. And this effectively cuts out the entry-level rung of opportunity into cyber. It makes it very difficult for us to build the next generation of cybersecurity workers and bring fresh blood into the industry. This also contributes to the issue of poaching, where if we're just recruiting from the same pool of cyber workers who already exist, then by definition, we're going to have to keep raising salaries to poach from one another. And so if we can figure out how to fix this issue and bring more fresh blood into the industry by offering more entry-level opportunity, that can also go a long way towards helping to fix some of these pipeline challenges. Similarly, we also see that in many cases, certifications are over-requested and undersupplied. Now, certifications can play a very important role in the hiring process and can serve as an effective proxy in many cases that demonstrates somebody's competence in cyber. But we find that in many cases, employers are not responsibly recruiting for these credentials. Take CISSP, for example. CISSP, great credential, requires minimum of 5 years of prior work experience in order to qualify for a full CISSP. We actually see that in about 20% of job openings calling for a CISSP, the job opening also says we want you to have no more than 2 years of prior work experience. You can't have both. We also see that there are more job openings calling for a CISSP than there are CISSP holders in the entire country. So mathematically, it is impossible to fill all of those roles with somebody who has a CISSP. And so employers really need to think long and hard about which of these credentials are need-to-haves versus nice-to-haves. And if it's just a nice-to-have credential, then you want to consider pulling it out of your job requirements. The last talent challenge that I'll share with you all today relates to degree requirements. And we see that there is a misalignment between the degree levels that employers are requesting and the degree levels that we're actually producing the most graduates at. Employers are far more likely to call for a bachelor's degree in entry-level cybersecurity jobs than any other degree level. And if you just look at the bachelor's degree numbers, it looks like we're not producing enough graduates to meet employer demand. But then it also looks like there's a surplus of workers who are graduating in cybersecurity programs with an associate's degree, or even with a master's degree for that matter. And so there's a misalignment between what employers are asking for and what we're actually producing. And in many cases, that bachelor's degree really isn't needed. And so if we were to find that employers shifted their education requirements down by just one level, in about 30% of cyber job openings, then this misalignment in degree requirements would essentially evaporate overnight. And so this is another case where, as an employer, you want to put a lot of thought into whether that bachelor's degree is really needed for a role or whether it's just a nice to have. And if it's a nice to have, again, consider pulling it out of the requirements. So those are some of the challenges, but how do we actually address them? What are some of the steps that we can take to fix the cybersecurity talent pipeline and expand opportunity for as many workers as possible? The first thing we can do is shift our mindset in how we recruit and train for workers in cyber. The legacy approach was to hire and train for degrees and certifications and what I call proxies for proficiency. They are intended to be a proxy for whether or not you have the skills needed in a particular role. And for a long time, we needed those kinds of proxies because there wasn't really a more efficient way to try to quickly determine whether or not somebody had the capabilities necessary for a role. But now we're seeing that there's an opportunity to shift our mindset away from those proxies for skills and actually go directly to hiring and training for the underlying skill sets that are going to be most important and indicative of proficiency in a particular role. A lot of people call this skills-based hiring. That's not necessarily a new concept. The White House, for example, when they released their National Cyber Education and Workforce Strategy recently, probably said skills-based hiring more than anyone ever has in one document. But I think that many times when people talk about skills-based hiring, it remains very abstract, very theoretical. And so I want to give some more concrete examples, what this actually means in practice if you're trying to implement skills-based hiring within your organization. So the first thing that you can do is you can right-size your job requirements. I've been talking about it already, how we need employers to rethink what are the nice-to-haves versus the need-to-haves within their job descriptions. And there are many benefits to doing this. It's very simple to make a couple of quick tweaks to your job descriptions in order to expand your recruiting aperture. We find, for example, that this also has real impact on employers' bottom lines. So it's, yes, great to expand the diversity of the cyber workforce, but it's also great for companies' financials. Just taking out a bachelor's degree requirement from entry-level cyber jobs, for example, on average saves over $15,000 for most employers and expands the entry-level candidate pool by over 60%. Similarly, taking out skills or certifications that are nice-to-haves but not need-to-haves, in many cases we see can reduce hiring costs by $5,000, $10,000 or more per hire. And when you add that up across all of the cybersecurity jobs that many large companies are hiring for, those are significant cost savings. The second thing that you can do is once you get people in the door and you start training people, you can prioritize the skill sets that are going to be highest growth and highest value within the context of your industry. We see that many companies can reap significant ROIs on the reskilling dollar if they don't just try to hire for the most in-demand, highest important skills in the market, but they really invest in training their people around those skills. And if you can pinpoint the skills that are both going to be increasingly important in the future and that command the largest salary premium in the market, then you can maximize the return on your reskilling dollar. In many cases, we see that certain skills in cyber, such as cloud security skills, some application development security skills, and others, they can command a salary premium of $10,000 or $15,000 or more. It doesn't cost $15,000 to train somebody in one skill set. And so by focusing your L&D efforts on some of these high-growth, high-value skills, you can maximize the return on your reskilling investments. The last thing I'll mention is that we can also build career pathways for our people. We can articulate where there are skill adjacencies between different roles within our cyber teams and beyond, and give people a very clear roadmap for how they can enter into and advance within the field within our companies. This makes it more likely that people will be able to actually visualize themselves in cyber and take the steps that they need in order to continuously advance within the field. This also has many spillover benefits for companies in that it helps with retention, helps with increasing internal mobility, it reduces onboarding time if you can transition someone internally rather than having to train up somebody from the outside. It's probably going to take 6 months until they're productive at least. And it helps us tap into more diverse talent pools because we can start to tap into skill-adjacent pools of talent that are already more diverse than cyber and bring them in to the cybersecurity ecosystem. I think all of these strategies are also illustrative of an approach to hiring that I like to call hiring for missionaries, not mercenaries. I think that our default for a long time, especially in cyber, has been going after the mercenaries. We look for somebody who has the sexiest resume, who went to the best school, who has the most years of experience, and looks the best on paper. But the reality is, a lot of those people who look the best on paper are primarily best at figuring out how to look good on paper. They might not actually be good employees in many contexts. And we find that definitely is suggested in the data. We see that when companies give someone a chance who comes from a more diverse background, or when companies invest in somebody who maybe didn't get as many job offers as the mercenary did, that employee is usually going to be more loyal to that company that gave him a chance. We see, for example, that cybersecurity workers with an associate's degree, they have a lower turnover rate than cybersecurity workers with a bachelor's degree. We see that female cybersecurity workers, on average, remain with their companies longer than male cybersecurity workers. We see similar dynamics at play for graduates from HBCUs and other diverse populations. And so I think it's clear that if you give somebody an opportunity and you invest in them, they're going to be more invested in your company because you gave them that chance. And so I strongly encourage any employers in the room to really try to shift your mindset away from always going after the person with the sexiest resume who effectively is a mercenary that probably is just going to go to another company as soon as they offer them more money, and try to invest in building missionaries within your company who come from as many backgrounds as possible, especially those who maybe come from backgrounds that haven't historically been given as much opportunity, because they will most likely be more loyal to the company that finally gives them that chance. And so just to start to tie this all together, we've seen that the cybersecurity talent pipeline is facing challenges. It's been broken by rapid skill evolution in the field, rapid growth in demand, inflated degree and credential and experience requirements. And this has created many barriers to bringing in a more diverse set of workers into the field. But there are steps we can take to help fix the cybersecurity talent pipeline and start to expand opportunity for more workers by taking more of a skills-based approach to hiring, investing in career pathways for our people, right-sizing job requirements, and training the people we already have. And in doing so, we can help to expand opportunity for more people, which is great for them, but is also great for our national and personal security. And so before I wrap this up, though, there is one more quick story I want to share with you all. So I mentioned at the beginning, when I was rummaging around my basement recently, I found my grandfather's old resume. I also found my grandmother's college transcript from the 1940s. And I was looking through it, and I realized she was getting amazing grades. She was putting my grades in college to shame. She was getting 96s, 98s, 100s. She had virtually straight A's in fields such as math, science, and philosophy. I thought, wow, I really want to learn more about her. I knew her towards the end of her life, but I didn't realize, it sounds like she was a pretty intelligent, impressive woman. So I asked around the family, and I found out that she was very impressive. She graduated college in 3 years. She had been accepted into Mensa. She became an engineer in the 40s and was promoted, actually, to an engineering manager overseeing my grandfather. That's actually how they met. I won't get into the ethics of dating your subordinate. Probably don't want to think too hard about what happened there. But the point is, as soon as she met my grandfather, they started a family. She left the workforce, never worked again day in her life. And there's nothing wrong if you want to prioritize family, but even as a young child, when I knew her towards the end of her life, it was clear that she was a little bit bitter, that she had had to set aside her ambitions for my grandfather's, even though she had been arguably more successful than him when they first met. And at the time, she thought that was just the way it was. She had to do that. And so the good news is that's no longer just the way it is. There is arguably more opportunity for more people today than there ever has been in human history. And that is worth celebrating. But as I mentioned earlier, just because it's worth celebrating, it's not worth stagnating. And we do see that barriers still remain. And so I want to leave you with this last statistic, which is that in the past 5 years, 40% of female cybersecurity workers have left cybersecurity. No, they didn't all leave to start a family. They might have gone into other jobs. They might have gone back to school, whatever it may be. But it still underscores the challenges that we have attracting and retaining a more diverse workforce into cyber. And so as you all have more conversations today, as you go to other sessions, listen to more speakers, I also want to leave you with this last question to think about throughout the rest of the day. And that is, what can you personally do to help expand opportunity for as many workers as possible in cyber? Whether it's taking some of the skills-based approaches to hiring or just collaborating with more folks across the cybersecurity ecosystem, as you're doing today, whatever it may be, think about what steps, however small, you can take to help expand opportunity for as many people as possible so that we can help to grow the cybersecurity workforce as quickly as possible and improve our national security and improve the opportunity for as many people as possible in the country. Thank you all so much.